Do you have to start from the beginning?
No, we don't need to start from the beginning.
You don't have that luxury when you go live.
No, we don't need to start from the beginning. But psychological innocence is not the same as being a doormat. And where I really experientially was able to make that distinction inside myself, I'll tell that story. But what I want is for people to really look at your own experiential knowing, because oftentimes people come up with these hypothetical situations that aren't their own and say, well, what about this? What about that? And really the impact of this is seeing it for yourself, seeing how it plays out in your life. And so I'll give a couple of examples, then you can let me know what you think. But one of the most profound experiences I had with this was that Angus and I used to do volunteer work in the prisons here in California. And I found myself in conversation sitting across from men who had perpetuated significant violent crimes, murder, rape, other acts of violence, the broad range of that. And oftentimes as part of the volunteer work, they would be sharing about their life circumstances, sharing about what was going on for them at the time that they committed the crime. And I was really incredibly touched and moved by that experience, and felt so much compassion for these men, because when I heard their story, I could really see that they were doing the best they could in the moment, that what they had done made sense to them in that moment, and even if 5 seconds later they regretted it, when they acted on their thinking in that moment, it made sense to them. And I could really make that separation in terms of me being able to see their psychological innocence and separate that out from the crime that they committed. I would never condone murder or rape or any of these other violent crimes, but it didn't stop me from feeling compassion for these men that had committed these crimes. And so that was one of the examples where it was really such a strong example for me, how seeing psychological innocence, seeing someone is doing the best that they can, is completely separate from agreeing with the behavior or condoning with the behavior. Now, the humbling part for me is that I was able to do that with these men over these very significant behaviors. And then when it would come to my relationship with Angus, I would blame him for things that are really minimal, minor, not that significant, and I'd get upset and angry about things. Like I was asking Angus today, what are the kinds of things I blame you notice that I blame you for? And he said, not reading labels. So he'll buy something at Whole Foods and bring it home, and it will have some ingredient that I don't want in it.
Corn syrup.
High fructose corn syrup or something. And I'll get upset about that, and I'll blame him for that. And yet I can have compassion for these men. And really what I see is when I get into that petty mindset within myself, that really when I'm blaming him for buying something with high fructose corn syrup in it, or whatever the other things that I'm not okay with or don't want to put in my body, I'm making him responsible for my experience in that moment. Like my blame has me, it's basically a reflection of me saying, you buying this is responsible for my experience in this moment, and I don't like it, and I'm blaming you for how I'm feeling. Now that's not true. It can never be true, because Angus can't be responsible for how I'm feeling in this moment. That's happening, that's an experience that's happening within myself. That's an experience that's in my own consciousness that comes and goes. It's going to depend on my state of mind, because some days if you buy something with high fructose corn syrup, I would like to think that I might be, oh, well, maybe I'll take that back. I would like to think that I don't do that every time.
No, I think I've got that out of my repertoire now. I no longer buy
so I can't test that
products
out
with fructose corn syrup.
Well, I would like to think that I might have days where I'm better at that than others, and that I'm not blaming you.
I must say, going to a supermarket with you is like going to the library with someone else, because you read every frigging label that's out there. It's like, puts a significant... I'm one of these people like to rush in and rush out. It's like a very long, drawn-out experience because of the extracurricular rating, as I see it.
Well, now that we're kind of going down that tangent, I'll say I've benefited from that, because Angus doesn't go shopping with me anymore and basically does the shopping. So I'm very grateful for that. But do you see the point that I'm saying? Do you see that how people conflate the two together, that letting go of blame is the same as condoning the behavior, and that's not what we're saying, that we're really saying that everybody is doing the best that they can, no matter what. Even when it's horrific behavior, that's still their best in that moment based on their state of mind. When I blame you for something, that is the best I can do in that moment. I don't mean to be horrible to you. I don't want to be a bitch in our relationship, but sometimes I do behave that way. And it seems like you get better and better at seeing my psychological innocence without condoning me getting annoyed at you over whatever petty things I get annoyed with you about.
Yeah, and I guess my response to this, if I'm to reflect upon this, is that I think people will hear what you're saying, and they're going to hear it with their intellect, and they're going to process it with their intellect, and they're going to have a yeah but every time, because they can always think of the worst case scenario to put themselves in, where that would be a very hard nut to swallow, to see someone else's psychological innocence. And I think, from me and my perspective, I think it's putting yourself in a situation, or finding yourself in a situation where you get to try this on for size, and you have your own experience and create your own reference point and see how it works out. And generally, I feel like, for me, I have seen that work out quite well to my advantage. And it's almost like I have a choice point. Do I want to go into the judgment? Do I want to enter into the reactivity and operate at that level? Or do I in some way look at it from a place of altitude, or through a different lens, the lens of this understanding, perhaps seeing their psychological innocence? And I feel that in that situation, the altitude that I, not all the time, but more often than not these days, find myself in, is that I feel like, yeah, I'm kind of leaving the judgment alone. I'm actually seeing their innocence, and, you know, at the very least having a sense of neutrality about what's going on, and ideally some compassion. But it's like, it's one of those real-time experiences where the proof is kind of in the pudding. And I feel like it's easy for us to talk about and point in that direction and do our best to articulate what we are suggesting. But it's like it's a real-time reference point that people have to have for themselves, because people are always going to approach it at the intellectual level, and it's not something that really can be experienced at the intellectual level. It's almost moving beyond that and getting a sense of the other individual's humanity, and that's where we begin to start to view the situation from the perspective of seeing their psychological innocence.
Yeah, and you kind of bring up a good point in terms of seeing the psychological innocence really is not a gift to the other person. This is not something you do for somebody else. It's actually what frees you up inside and liberates you. Like, that's why I think it's so important. And I actually feel that it's the opposite of being a doormat, because I actually find it incredibly empowering to have that freedom in my mind, to know that I don't have to take up my mental bandwidth with thinking about judgment, thinking about blame, because every time I'm doing that, I'm the one that's suffering. So Angus might have bought the high fructose corn syrup, whatever, and if I'm getting into my head about that, I'm the one that's suffering. And I might even, if I say something to him and he doesn't take it personally, he's not even suffering. But letting go of blame is a way that we release our mind from that rumination that only comes back on us. And what I find, I know that, and you're echoing it, that we're encouraging you to stick with your life experience, to see this on an experiential level, how you can have more freedom of mind, how you can experience more peace of mind, more open-heartedness, more compassion. That's what we're pointing to, and you really see that real time in the here and now. But in terms of more extreme situations, I do have the experience as a therapist working with clients that have more extreme life circumstances that they've had to struggle with and come up against. And what I found is that when people really start to see the psychological innocence, even in very difficult circumstances, it frees their mind so that they're actually more able to listen to their own wisdom, to follow their own inner guidance, and to then take whatever necessary action steps are needed for them to take care of themselves. But when they're caught up in the oftentimes it's self-judgment as well as blame, when they're caught up in that cycle, it's very difficult to hear the inner wisdom, to hear the deeper knowing, to listen more deeply to what's beyond the noise of our conditioning.
Yeah, I don't really feel like I have anything more to add to that, because that's the pivotal point, is to be able to see that for themselves. And it's easy for us to sit here and say that it's perhaps not the best choice to engage in whatever experience they're having from the other party that is looking very confrontational. And there are so many different scenarios that could be really impossible to comprehend, in terms of how you would see their psychological innocence in that moment. But there's something about our mindset that if we allow ourselves to get pulled into that judgment, pulled into that exchange, is that Einstein quote, you can't solve a problem at the level of consciousness that it was created. It's kind of, in a sense, we've got to look to the higher ground, and the higher ground in this case is look in the direction of our essential nature, which will be one that would prompt us to see this situation through more compassionate eyes, or at the very least, a sense of neutrality, and recognize that this person has completely lost the plot. They're out to lunch, they've gone off the deep end, whatever they're doing, it's kind of like they've separated themselves from their essential nature. So the choice point is, here's an individual that's separated themselves from their essential nature. I need to look in that direction, because I need to put the oxygen mask on myself first. And as you say, I'm sure in that situation we would have better access to make the right decisions. And sometimes those are decisions like, let's get the hell out of here. Or sometimes the situation is I will leave this relationship. But we want to look to that access point as a better resource to make the right, to access our wisdom, really, in that situation.
Yeah, and I want to just make just a slight clarification. When Angus is saying separating ourselves from our essential nature, you're talking about having experience of being separate from our essential nature, because we can never be separate from it, but we all have the experience of being separate from it. And that came up. You said something really beautiful last night on the webinar, in terms of someone was sharing about separation anxiety, and you were saying how really the anxiety we have is when we feel separate from our true nature, but that's never the truth of it.
Yeah, and the context that it was being using, I don't know, maybe it was being used in this context, but I think it was referring to how babies get into separation anxiety. And it's kind of like, as human beings, I think all anxiety is a result of separation from our essential nature.
An experience of separation.
An experience of separation, yes.
Yeah. We get caught up and we feel separate, but we're never separate. That's why we don't need to be anxious.
We're never separate, yeah. So the illusion of separation.
That's right.
So this individual who's freaking out in front of us has bought into the illusion of separation.
What individual?
Whoever we have a problem with in any given moment.
Oh, got it. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Like when we're blaming someone.
Yeah.
We're actually feeling separate from our essential nature in that moment, and they probably are too.
Yeah.
And that because we can't control another person, we do have the opportunity to look within ourselves. And again, the looking within is what frees us, and then we can take whatever action makes sense from that. So that's why this is not being a doormat. We're saying take whatever action is necessary, but when you look within and you listen to the feedback from your inner knowing, you listen to that place of wisdom inside of yourself, then the right action is going to show up for you, whatever that might be. And it doesn't, and the more we use self-judgment, the more we judge another, the harder it is to hear that inner knowing, the harder it is to look within and to gain access to that within ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, have a lovely weekend, everybody. I hope you're going to enjoy it, even if you're having to stay safe. And we just send you lots of love. And would love to hear any feedback you have for us, because if this isn't clarified, I really want to answer whatever questions that come up for you. And let me just have a look. I don't see any questions in the comments, but if there are any questions that come up for you, please just let us know, and we'd be happy to respond.
Yeah, it helps us clarify it for ourselves.
Yes.
Distill it into something more easier to articulate, for me anyway.
Yeah, we want to keep it simple and real.
Yeah.
All right, lots of love, everybody.
Take care. Bye.